Hello, my name is Bill Zebedee, and I'd like to welcome you to the Jesus in the Movies and on TV series. This series is dedicated to my mother-in-law, Ann Thomas, who passed away in September 2020. I am basing this series in part on workshops Ann conducted around the world for almost 20 years. I'd also like to dedicate this series to my father, William Wellington Zebedee II, of whom I am named after. Dad passed in February 2021. Enjoy this series. Thank you very much.
Movies about Jesus couldn't avoid the counterculture too long, as we saw musicals like Godspell, The Gospel Road, and Jesus Christ Superstar, and movies such as The Passover Plot and Monty Python's The Life of Brian, all of which broke the Jesus mold. Let's begin exploring Richard Ascoff's The Countercultural Jesus. I may occasionally call this episode The Hippie Jesus. 1973 gave us 3 unique adaptations on Jesus, with the release of 3 musicals, each with their own uniqueness. In the musical Godspell, Jesus appears in the form of Canadian actor Victor Garber. Based on the Gospel of Matthew, Garber brings an interesting hippie Jesus to the screen, dressed in a Superman shirt, rainbow suspenders, a big afro, a heart painted on his forehead, and, of course, clown shoes. Nobody can deny this is a unique presentation of Christ, and that the apostles are just as unique. Jesus and the gang sing and dance through the streets and parks of New York City, even having a dance number atop one of the buildings of the World Trade Center. And as with many counterculture ideas, there are critics. Freak L. Baker, in The Challenge of the Silver Screen, an analysis of the cinematic portraits of Jesus, Rama, Buddha, and Muhammad, raises the valid point that the musical, quote, omits all the miracles, including Jesus' healing, end quote. The Last Supper takes place in a scrapyard, and Christ is chained to a fence for the crucifixion scene. A police car serves as the arresting party. Although neither John the Baptist nor Jesus Christ characters are actually named, all the apostles were given the first names of the actors who portrayed them. I found this musical uplifting and appealing. What better way to reach the younger crowd of the time than presenting a 1,970-year-old story in modern times? Unlike with other actors who portrayed Jesus and said it negatively affected their career, Garber continued to shine as an actor, singer, and performer on stage, in movies, and on television. Then there is Jesus Christ Superstar, starring Ted Neely in the role of Christ. I'm going to start by saying my mother-in-law, Ann Thomas, who this series is dedicated to, once said in an article that appeared in the Ottawa Citizen in September 1999, she thought Neely was thin and aesthetic. Ann's sentiment is echoed by others, as with Len Reehey in The Many Faces of Jesus, screen portrayals of Christ, who said, Neely plays Jesus as a sometimes wimpy man elevated to God status by his rabid followers, who are as troubled by inner demons as he is. Phil Hill, in the 3 Jesus musicals of 1973, says Neely, quote, might be the most emotionally complex Jesus in movie history, with behavior that violently swings between emotional levels. Hill also says Neely's vocalizing is not particularly vibrant, and his physical presence is underwhelming. Again, like with Godspell, in my humble opinion, bringing the story of Jesus to the hippie generation wasn't easy. Personally, I loved the soundtracks and the singers. I liked it better with Neely more than I did with John Legend, who I think is an amazing singer, but wrong for the part, who starred as Christ in 2018's Jesus Christ Superstar. Country music legend Johnny Cash couldn't avoid a movie about Jesus. Cash, who narrates and makes appearances in this movie and was well known for his spiritual beliefs, collaborated with director Robert Elfstrom, who also starred as Jesus, to make The Gospel Road, a story of Jesus, in 1973. Phil Hall, in the 3 Jesus musicals, said, while Elfstrom may not have been physically correct for the role, his performance was remarkable for capturing the softer side of Jesus' humanity. I am putting musical in the hippie Jesus category simply because of Cash himself saying that Jesus was a hippie. In 1975, director Roberto Rossellini brought us Il Messia, the Messiah, from Italy, which saw Pierre Maria Rossi as Jesus. Eric Gunawan, in Jesus in Film, Representation, Misrepresentation, and Denial of Jesus' Agony and Apocryphal Gospel, said, Rossellini's Jesus is an ordinary man, like one of us persons. I found the Passover plot from 1976 to be an interesting take on the story of Jesus. Casting Zalman King as Christ broke history in Jesus movies and on television, as Reverend Michael Morris says in The Real Jesus. The actor who played Christ was actually Jewish, thus further destroying the bias of portraying Christ as a Northern European. In this movie, Jesus tells Judas to betray him. Jesus also conspires with his apostles to fake his death on the cross so that he can be resurrected. And then there are the cheesemakers. Monty Python and the Life of Brian was released in 1979 to a wrath of criticism and backlash. Although he is only seen briefly in the Sermon on the Mount, Kenneth Cawley was Christ. The sermon was interrupted by dialogue between various characters, and as a way to bring the listener back to the sermon, there were references to what Jesus was saying. But, instead of "Blessed are the peacemakers," one of the characters had heard my mother-in-law's favorite line from any movie we'll discuss here, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." At another point, one character, instead of hearing "the meek shall inherit the earth," hears "the Greek shall inherit the earth." I think the movie is summed up best in The Bible and its cinematic adaptations, a consideration of the filmic exegesis by Rhonda Burnett Bletch, who said the movie follows the misadventures of Brian Cohen, whose life parallels and parodies that of his contemporary Jesus in many ways. Although I don't show video of it in this series, I wanted to mention Karuna Mayudu, or Ocean of Mercy, which was released in 1978 and stars Vijaya Chander. This is the story of Christ told in the language of Telugu from India. According to notes from my mother-in-law, the cast and crew of this film were all Christians from India. Now, I would like to give some honorable mentions. First, an episode of the television show MASH, specifically from episode 9 in season 4, called Quo Vadis, Captain Chandler, where Alan Fudge plays an injured soldier who believes he is Jesus. I always loved MASH, and now I have a chance to talk about it, if only briefly. The 4077 doctors called Dr. Sidney Freeman in for a consult on Fudge's character. Through a number of scenes, we find out the truth behind the soldier's mental health. It is a sad but interesting episode I would recommend you watch if you haven't already. As I re-watched this episode, I realized there is no laugh track, a rare occurrence for the show. In one touching scene, Radar brings his teddy bear to Captain Chandler and asks him to bless it. What I loved best about this episode was the sadness Fudge had in his eyes during each and every scene. The other honorable mention is a movie called The Trial of Billy Jack. It sounds odd that a Jesus figure would appear in a martial arts movie, and I will say the figure is not directly called Jesus, but the assumption is there that it is him. The scene is while Billy Jack is on a vision quest in the desert. He is visited by a woman dressed in traditional American First Nations clothing and gives Jack direction to go and slap people in the face. First, he slaps a football fan, who violently strikes back. Second, he slaps an activist who strikes back with powerful condemnation of his actions. The third is this Jesus figure who, when slapped by Jack, feels pity for the man and forgives him. I wanted to mention this because I have always been a fan of Billy Jack, and though I haven't watched the movie series in decades, I clearly remembered this scene when I started this project. Here ends the hippie Jesus. Next time we will look at Askoff's The Conservative Jesus of the 1970s. As always, like and subscribe so you can be notified when a new episode is released.